What happens when a funeral transforms into a dramatic revelation, exposing secrets that shake a family to its core? Today, we uncover a powerful tale of love, truth, and redemption that you won't want to miss. The somber gathering was meant to be a final farewell, a family's quiet mourning for a beloved son, a chance to bid adieu to his parents. But abruptly, the grand doors swung inward, revealing a sodden adolescent clutching an infant the instant his voice cut through the solemnity. A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Every breath in the sanctuary seemed to halt. What's he doing here? A hushed voice questioned, eyes darting toward the front. There, a man in a dark, impeccable suit, typically poised, commanding, unassailable, froze, as if confronting a specter, his jaw clenched, hands white-knuckled around the pew. He knew this unexpected arrival. And in that stark moment, so did everyone else. Where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. Because trust me, you won't want to miss a second of this, for often profound affection emerges from the depths of profound grief. On that dreary October morning, the grand polished doors of St. Michael's Cathedral stood agape, welcoming Boston's elite. Final rites for Jackson and Leila Jose. Inside, the vast sanctuary was adorned with pristine lilies and fragrant roses, their sweet aroma struggling against the pervasive grief. The devastating automobile collision that had claimed the lives of the city's preeminent philanthropic couple had dominated headlines across New England. Their sole progeny, Jackson Jose III, occupied the foremost pew, his impeccable dark attire and composed demeanor concealing what most perceived as profound sorrow. At 35, he was poised to inherit not only the Jose family's vast real estate dominion, but also his parents' legacy of philanthropy, which had touched countless underprivileged lives throughout Massachusetts. Father Matthews had barely commenced his eulogy when the ponderous wooden entrance groaned open, admitting a bluster of wind and rain. The assembled sorrowkeepers turned as one, their gasps reverberating against the vaulted ceiling. There, utterly soaked, stood a 17-year-old, his dark hair plastered to his brow, gently cradling a slumbering infant swaddled in a pink wrap. I'm sorry, his voice, though trembling, cut through the hallowed quiet of the cathedral. But Mr. and Mrs. Jose need to know the truth before they're laid to rest. His eyes, rimmed with red and resolute, locked onto Jackson, who had already risen, his complexion draining of color. The infant stirred, emitting a soft whimper that seemed to pierce the stillness. The young man advanced, water dripping from his threadbare jacket onto the gleaming marble. This is Elaine, he declared, addressing the gathered mourners directly. She's their granddaughter. The collective inhalation of breath was distinctly audible. Jackson Jose II's hands clenched the pew before him, knuckles stark white with strain. But it was the elder woman in the third row, Leila Jose's sister Catherine, who shattered the silence with a choked sob, her gaze fixed on the infant's face, a face bearing the unmistakable ancestral Jose features. The boy held his ground as security personnel began to move towards him. Your parents passed, believing they had no grandchildren, Jackson, he stated, his voice gaining resonance. They passed without knowing about Elaine or about Esther, my sister. He swallowed hard, tears mingling with the rainwater on his cheeks. The same Esther who served as their housekeeper for 2 years. The same Esther who vanished 9 months ago. Jackson Jose II's carefully constructed composure began to fray, a bead of perspiration trickling down his temple. Despite the church's cool interior, the low hum among the mourners intensified, and several journalists present to cover the high-profile service were already furiously jotting notes. Yet the young man had not concluded. He gently repositioned Elaine in his arms, revealing an envelope tucked within her blanket. I have here, his voice resonated through the vast space, Esther's diary, and letters that corroborate everything, letters that explain why my sister disappeared without a trace, and why she made me promise to bring her daughter here today. The security guards had reached the young man, but Catherine Jose's commanding voice cut through the tension. Stop, let the boy speak. She rose from her seat, her aristocratic features rigid, as she confronted her nephew Jackson. I always suspected there was more to Esther's disappearance, Jackson. What have you done? As if on cue, Elaine began to wail, her cries echoing off the lofty ceiling and vibrant stained-glass windows. The sound seemed to penetrate the very heart of the assembly, an undeniable demand for truth in that moment, as hundreds of eyes darted between the trembling teenager with the crying infant and the powerful scion of the Jose. Fortune, one truth became blindingly clear. This funeral was poised to unearth secrets that would rock Boston's high society to its core, and more significantly test the true meaning of kinship, accountability, and atonement. The question was no longer simply what Jackson had done. It was what would unfold next, as the truth threatened to dismantle decades of meticulously maintained facades and social standing, and somewhere within that precarious balance hung the destiny of an infant girl representing both a scandal and a beacon of healing. The profound tension within St. Michael's Cathedral was almost tangible, as Elaine's cries softened to mere whimpers. The young man felt the collective gaze of hundreds upon him, yet it was the memory of his sister Esther that imbued him with fortitude to precede Esther. Dolly had always been more than just a housekeeper for the Jose family at 24. She had diligently worked her way through community college, while raising her younger sibling after their parents' demise in a restaurant fire. She was sharp, industrious, and resolute in her ambition to forge a better existence for herself, and her brother, the extensive Jose mansion on Beacon Hill, had become her place of employment. 2 years prior, initially appearing as an ideal prospect, Leela. Jose had immediately taken a liking to Esther, impressed by her intellect and diligence. Jackson, Jose often commended her meticulousness and reliability. However, it was their son Jackson who exhibited a different sort of interest, one that would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. My sister, the young man continued, his voice steady, despite his pounding heart, kept meticulous records of everything. She was always so organized. He shifted Elaine in his arms, and the infant's tiny hand grasped his finger. She documented how Jackson began paying her special attention last year, modest gifts, at first, then private discussions, then promises. Catherine Jose had drawn nearer, her eyes fixed on the infant. Elaine possessed her mother's delicate features, but there was no denying the distinctive Jose chin and those specific gray-blue eyes. The very eyes that had marked the Jose lineage for generations. Esther was astute, the boy stated, directly addressing Catherine. She understood the risks of getting involved with Jackson, but he convinced her. He was unlike other affluent men. He claimed he was falling in love with her. His voice wavered slightly. He told her his parents would comprehend, that they valued character over social standing, that their philanthropic endeavors proved their concern for people outweighed appearances. Jackson remained petrified, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions. Reporters furiously scribbled, and smartphones had materialized throughout the congregation, capturing every utterance. When Esther discovered her pregnancy, the young man went on. She was terrified, yet hopeful. She trusted Jackson. When he promised to stand by her, he paused, looking directly at Jackson. That was 9 months ago. The very day she informed you about the baby was the last time anyone at school saw her. The implications of his declaration hung heavy in the air. Catherine Jose's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening with comprehension. The summer house, she whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Jackson insisted on personally overseeing the renovations last year. A new surge of murmurs swept through the sanctuary. The Jose summer residence in Newport had indeed undergone extensive renovations, during which Jackson had been uncharacteristically involved in supervising the work. Despite his usual habit of delegating such duties, Esther wasn't merely frightened. When she disappeared, the boy divulged, his voice gaining strength. She was desperate. Jackson had threatened to ruin her life if she didn't take care of the problem. But Esther, he gazed down at Elaine with fierce paternal pride. Esther believed every life was precious, just as your parents taught you. Jackson, the baby, chose that moment to fully open her eyes, revealing those unmistakable Jose eyes. To every observer, several people gasped, and Catherine stepped forward to inspect her grandniece more closely. But there's something else, the young man added, reaching into his jacket pocket with his free hand, something Esther uncovered while working in the mansion, something concerning the Jose Charitable Foundation that she included in her diary information, that made Jackson even more desperate to silence her. Jackson finally stirred, taking a step toward the boy, his composed facade utterly fracturing. You don't understand what you're talking about, he uttered. But his voice quivered with uncertainty. The young man stood firm, holding Elaine closer. I know precisely what I'm talking about. Jackson. Esther may have vanished, but she ensured the truth wouldn't stay concealed forever. She left evidence in multiple locations with multiple individuals, people who were instructed to come forward if anything happened to her. The implications hovered like a brewing storm. This was no longer solely about a clandestine relationship or an unacknowledged grandchild. Deeper, darker secrets threatened to surface, and as the rain persisted outside the cathedral's stained glass windows, the gathered mourners realized they were witnessing not merely a family scandal, but potentially the dismantling of one of Boston's most venerable legacies. Catherine Jose straightened her posture, years of social polish warring with the rage building in her eyes. Jackson. She declared, her voice, slicing through the tension, like a blade. I believe it's time you tell us exactly what transpired with Esther Dolly. And you had better pray she is safe and sound, as if sensing the gravity of the instant. Elaine began to fuss once more, her tiny hands reaching toward Catherine. The gesture, so innocent, yet so profound, seemed to underscore the weight of the revelations poised to unfold, secrets that would irrevocably alter the Jose family's heritage. The tension within St. Michael's Cathedral escalated to a critical point as Jackson Jose III finally advanced into the central aisle. His custom-tailored suit could not conceal the slight tremor in his hands as he confronted the young man and his infant child. You desire the truth? Jackson's voice reverberated through the vast space. The truth is complex. Esther was meant to remain at the Newport residence until we could resolve matters. She wasn't supposed to. His voice faded as Catherine Jose interjected sharply. Until you could resolve matters, a pregnant young woman doesn't simply vanish for 9 months to figure things out. Jackson, where is Esther now? The young man shifted Elaine his arms and produced Esther's diary. I will recount precisely what transpired, because Esther meticulously documented everything. It commenced last December during the Jose Christmas Gala. The diary entry, which he began to read, transported everyone back to that snowy evening, when Esther had stumbled upon something she was never meant to see. December 21st, 2024. I was tidying Mr. Jose S.R.'s office during the Christmas Gala when I discovered the discrepancies. The Foundation's records indicated millions in contributions to children's hospitals and educational initiatives, yet the actual transfers represented only a fraction of those amounts. Jackson's private accounts revealed regular deposits matching the missing funds. When Jackson found me in the office, I anticipated anger. Instead, he was calm. Unnervingly so. He claimed his parents wouldn't comprehend that sometimes business demanded creative accounting. He said he could lose everything if anyone found out. Then he kissed me for the first time. I should have departed then. I should have known better. Esther didn't merely vanish because she was expecting. The young man went on, his voice strengthening. She disappeared because she possessed too much knowledge about the Foundation, about the embezzled funds, about everything. Jackson's complexion had turned ashen. You fail to comprehend. He stated the Foundation required restructuring. My parents were too idealistic, too generous. I was safeguarding our heritage by misappropriating funds meant for sick children. Catherine's voice cut through the air like a whip. Gasps arose from the assembled mourners, and reporters' pens scratched frantically against their notepads. The boy produced another document from his jacket. This is a letter Esther composed for your parents 3 weeks ago, but they passed before it reached them. She attempted to inform them of everything. Jackson. About the baby, about the Foundation, about her confinement. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Jose, by the time you read this, your granddaughter will have been born. Her name is Elaine, and she has your eyes. I am writing to convey the truth, not merely about her, but about everything. I am being held at the Newport house, observed by individuals Jackson hired. He asserts it's for my own protection. But we both know that's untrue. I've seen the Foundation's true financial statements. I know what he has been doing with the money intended for children's hospitals and schools. I once believed I loved him. Perhaps I did, but love should never cost anyone their liberty or their conscience. If anything befalls me, please care for Elaine and please rectify this. Esther Dolly. The words of the letter hung in the air like a dense fog. Father Matthews, who had maintained his silence throughout the confrontation, stepped forward. Jackson, is this factual? Have you been embezzling from your family's charitable foundation? Jackson's composure finally fractured completely. Everything I did was to safeguard our position, our influence. The Foundation was draining our resources. My parents were too idealistic, too generous. I was safeguarding our heritage by misappropriating funds meant for sick children. Catherine's voice could have frozen hell itself. Your mother spent her entire life cultivating relationships with hospitals, schools, and community organizations. Your father devoted himself to creating opportunities for underprivileged children, and you've demolished it all. Esther stepped forward, still clutching her evidence. When I informed Jackson I was pregnant, he saw it as an opportunity. He believed he could control me, keep me silent about the Foundation, by threatening to take Elaine away if I ever spoke up. He didn't account for a mother's resolve to protect both her child and the truth. She turned to address the assembled crowd directly. I spent 9 months in that house observing through windows, as construction crews came and went. Jackson told everyone it was being renovated, but they were actually installing advanced security systems cameras, transforming it into a luxurious prison. But he made one crucial error. He underestimated the loyalty of some of the old Jose staff. The young man picked up the narrative. Mrs. Sullivan, the housekeeper, who retired last year, never ceased caring about the Jose family's true heritage. She assisted Esther in documenting everything, helped her plan her escape. She's the one who kept me updated, who helped me understand when to bring Elaine here today. The elderly housekeeper, who had been sitting quietly in a back pew, slowly rose. The Joseas were more than just my employers for 30 years, she stated, her Irish accent thick with emotion. They were good people who believed in helping others. I couldn't stand by and watch their son obliterate everything they built. Jackson looked around wildly, observing former allies and board members recoiling from him. The evidence was overwhelming, and Esther's tangible presence made it impossible to dismiss as mere allegations. But Esther was not finished. There's more, she said, gently rocking Elaine as the baby began to fuss. Esther isn't at the Newport house anymore. 2 days ago, she managed to send me a message. That's why I'm here today. She's. Before she could complete her sentence, the cathedral doors burst open. Once more, everyone turned to behold a figure, standing in the doorway, drenched from the rain, looking thin but determined. Esther Dolly stood there, pale but unequivocally alive, her dark eyes fixed on her daughter. The assembled crowd erupted in pandemonium. Jackson stumbled backward, his face a mask of shock and terror. Catherine Jose rushed toward Esther, while the reporters scrambled to capture every moment of the unfolding drama, but Esther was oblivious to them all. Her gaze was locked on her baby daughter, who had begun squirming in the young man's arms at the sound of her mother's voice. 9 months of separation, of fear, of desperate plans, and careful documentation had led to this moment. I won't be silenced any longer. Esther's voice rang out clear and strong, and neither will the truth about the Jose Foundation. As she stepped into the cathedral, briefcase clutched in her trembling hands, everyone present knew they were witnessing more than just a family scandal. They were observing the precise moment when years of meticulously constructed falsehoods began to crumble, and the authentic heritage of the Jose name hung in the balance. The reunion between Esther and her infant was simultaneously beautiful and poignant. As the young man carefully placed the baby into her mother's embrace, Esther's tears flowed freely, mingling with the rain that still clung to her clothes. Elaine instantly settled against her mother's chest, as if their separation had never occurred. Catherine Jose observed the scene with a mix of complex emotions etched across her patrician features. The resemblance between Elaine and her late sister Leela as an infant was undeniable, yet more urgent matters pressed upon them. We need to understand everything, Catherine stated, stepping forward, not just for justice, but for Jackson and Leela's true heritage. Esther nodded, her arms still wrapped protectively around Elaine. 2 days ago, I managed to escape from the Newport house. I had been planning it for months, meticulously gathering evidence, making copies of crucial documents. She glanced at Jackson, who remained transfixed near his parents' caskets. I knew, if I fled too soon, he would destroy everything, and no one would ever uncover the truth. The young man moved closer to his sister. As she continued her narrative, the assembled mourners, including several board members of the Jose Foundation, listened in stunned silence. The foundation's corruption extends deeper than just Jackson. Esther revealed, her voice steady despite her evident exhaustion. There's a network of fictitious charities, shell corporations, all designed to appear as legitimate philanthropic endeavors. Funds designated for children's hospitals were being diverted into private accounts. Grants for educational initiatives were siphoned into offshore investments. Jackson finally found his voice. You don't comprehend what it takes to uphold a legacy like ours, he uttered, desperation creeping into his tone. The social obligations, the constant expectations. I comprehend perfectly. Esther interrupted, her voice gaining force. I comprehend that you exploited your parents' reputation for good works to line your own pockets. I comprehend that, when I discovered the truth, you attempted to buy my silence with false affection, and when that failed with threats. She handed Elaine back to the young man and opened her briefcase, extracting a thick folder. These are duplicates of every transaction, every fraudulent charity, every diverted donation. For the past 5 years, your parents were oblivious, Because you manipulated the reports, they saw you knew they trusted you implicitly with the Foundation's operations. Catherine Hosea's face hardened into a mask of stone. The children's cancer ward at Boston General, she murmured quietly. The one Leela was so proud of funding last year received less than a quarter of the announced donation, confirmed Esther. Stated the remainder went into a series of private investments under Jackson's authority. The cathedral erupted in murmurs as board members began whispering urgently among themselves. Several were already on their phones, presumably contacting their legal representatives. Jackson's composure finally shattered completely. Everything I did was to secure our future. He bellowed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. The Foundation was bleeding us dry. My parents lived in a fantasy world where we could simply give everything away. Someone had to be practical. Practical. Catherine's voice was sharp enough to freeze hell itself. Your mother spent her entire life cultivating relationships with hospitals, schools, and community organizations. Your father devoted himself to creating opportunities for underprivileged children, and you've demolished it all. Esther stepped forward, still clutching her evidence. When I informed Jackson I was pregnant, he saw it as an opportunity. He believed he could control me, keep me silent about the Foundation, by threatening to take Elaine away if I ever spoke up. He didn't account for a mother's resolve to protect both her child and the truth. She turned to address the assembled crowd directly. I spent 9 months in that house, observing through windows as construction crews came and went. Jackson told everyone it was being renovated, but they were actually installing advanced security systems, cameras, transforming it into a luxurious prison. But he made one crucial error. He underestimated the loyalty of some of the old Jose staff. The young man picked up the narrative. Mrs. Sullivan, the housekeeper, who retired last year, never ceased caring about the Jose family's true heritage. She assisted Esther in documenting everything, helped her plan her escape. She's the one who kept me updated, who helped me understand when to bring Elaine here today. The elderly housekeeper, who had been sitting quietly in a back pew, slowly rose. The Joseas were more than just my employers for 30 years, she stated, her Irish accent thick with emotion. They were good people who believed in helping others. I couldn't stand by and watch their son obliterate everything they built. Jackson looked around, wildly observing former allies and board members recoiling from him. The evidence was overwhelming, and Esther's tangible presence made it impossible to dismiss as mere allegations. But Esther was not finished. There's more, she said, gently rocking Elaine as the baby began to fuss. Esther isn't at the Newport house anymore. 2 days ago, she managed to send me a message. That's why I'm here today. She's. Before she could complete her sentence, the cathedral doors burst open again. Everyone turned to witness a figure standing in the doorway, drenched from the rain, looking thin but determined. Esther Dolly stood there, pale but unequivocally alive, her dark eyes fixed on her daughter. The assembled crowd erupted in chaos. Jackson stumbled backward, his face a mask of shock and terror. Catherine Jose rushed toward Esther while the reporters scrambled to capture every moment of the unfolding drama, but Esther wasn't looking at any of them. Her eyes were locked on her baby daughter, who had begun squirming in the young man's arms at the sound of her mother's voice. 9 months of separation, of fear, of desperate plans, and careful documentation had led to this moment. I won't be silenced any longer. Esther's voice rang out clear and strong, and neither will the truth about the Jose Foundation. As she stepped into the cathedral, briefcase clutched in her trembling hands, everyone present knew they were witnessing more than just a family scandal. They were seeing the moment when years of carefully constructed lies began to crumble, and the true legacy of the Jose name hung in the balance. The sound of sirens intensified as Esther's hand steadied around the incriminating document. The rain outside had grown heavier, drumming against the cathedral's stained glass windows like a grim toll. Elaine whimpered softly in the young man's arms, sensing the acute tension pervading the hallowed space. 3 days before their demise, Esther began, her voice clear despite her emotion. Jackson and Leela Jose received an anonymous email regarding discrepancies in the Foundation's accounts. They were slated to meet with their financial auditors the day after they died. Catherine Jose's face became utterly devoid of color. The brake failure, she questioned. Jackson told us the mechanic found evidence of wear and tear. Because that's what he paid the mechanic to assert, Esther retorted, producing another document. I found the proof in Jackson's private email exchanges. He knew his parents were beginning to ask questions. The Foundation's annual audit was drawing near, and he could no longer conceal the missing millions. Jackson's face had turned a ghastly white. "You're fabricating," he whispered, but his voice lacked any conviction. Esther continued her words, cutting through the cathedral like shards of glass. The Josea's regular mechanic, Mr. Rodriguez, was suddenly awarded a substantial bonus the day before he certified the brake failure as an accident. But what Jackson didn't realize was that Mr. Rodriguez possesses a conscience. He retained copies of everything. The elderly mechanic rose from his seat at the rear of the church stairs, streaming down his weathered face. "I've maintained the Jose family's automobiles for 2 decades," he stated, his voice thick with emotion. "When Jackson offered me the money, I was terrified, but I couldn't live with myself. I documented everything and provided duplicates to Mrs. Sullivan. We've been awaiting the opportune moment." The police sirens had now ceased, and the distinct sound of footsteps ascending the cathedral steps echoed through the space. Jackson looked around wildly like a trapped creature. It wasn't meant to unfold this way, he uttered, his composed facade crumbling completely. They were merely supposed to be delayed that day, to miss their meeting with the auditors. The breaks were just meant to frighten them, to make them turn back. "I never intended, but they died." Jackson. Catherine's voice was glacial. "Your own parents perished because you could not bear to face the repercussions of your actions." The cathedral doors opened, and 2 police detectives entered, accompanied by uniformed officers. They paused at the threshold, taking in the scene before them. But there was one final revelation yet to come. Esther pulled out a last piece of paper from her briefcase. "There's something else everyone needs to know," she stated, looking directly at Catherine. "Something Jackson and Leila Jose did know before they died." The entire congregation seemed to hold its breath. Even the police officers waited, sensing the moment's profound gravity. "They knew about Elaine," Esther revealed, her voice softening. "They discovered their granddaughter 2 days before their death, and they were overjoyed." She handed Catherine a letter, its paper worn from being handled countless times. Catherine's hand trembled as she recognized her sister's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Esther Jackson, and I cannot express our joy at learning about our granddaughter. Please don't think we're angry. We've always known Jackson had his struggles, but a child is a blessing. We're meeting with our lawyers tomorrow to ensure both you and the baby are protected, no matter what. We've also received troubling information about the Foundation that we need to investigate. If our suspicions are correct, there will be difficult times ahead for our family, but know this: you and our grandchild will always be part of that family. With love, Leila Jose." Catherine's choked sob resonated through the cathedral. "The timestamp on this email," she murmured. "They wrote this just hours before Jackson ensured they would never make it to either meeting." Esther finished quietly, "before they could protect their granddaughter or expose the truth about the Foundation." The police officers were advancing now, but Jackson's eyes were fixated on the letter in Catherine's hands. For the first time since the funeral began, genuine emotion cracked through his meticulously constructed facade. Not fear of apprehension, but the horrifying realization of what he had truly wrought. "They knew," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They knew about Elaine, and they were happy. They were going to welcome both of us into the family. Your mother was already planning Elaine's nursery in the main house," Esther said, tears flowing freely now. "But you never gave them the chance to tell you that." The truth hung in the air like a physical presence. The tragedy not just of lives extinguished, but of what could have been. A family united instead of fragmented, a legacy preserved instead of annihilated. As the police officers reached Jackson, Elaine began to cry again, her wails echoing off the cathedral's vaulted ceiling. The sound seemed to pierce through Jackson's last defenses. He sank to his knees right there between his parents' caskets as the detective began reciting his rights. But this was not the story's conclusion. As Esther watched the father of her child being led away in handcuffs, she understood the most arduous part was yet to commence. The Jose Foundation's corruption had affected hundreds of lives, and rectifying it would demand more than mere criminal justice. Catherine Jose stepped forward, still clutching Leila's letter, and reached for her grandniece as she gently touched Elaine's cheek. Her voice carried the weight of generations. "We'll set this right," she promised, "for Leila and Jackson, for all the people who were harmed, and most of all for Elaine. She deserves to know her grandparents' authentic heritage." The rain outside began to subside, and a shaft of sunlight pierced through the stained glass windows, illuminating the space where a family had been shattered. and where perhaps it could begin to mend the subsequent hours, in St. Michael's Cathedral, blurred into a cascade of police statements, tears, and shocking disclosures as detectives collected evidence and recorded testimonies. The true extent of Jackson Jose III's transgressions began to surface. The funeral had utterly transformed into something else entirely. A moment of reckoning that would irrevocably alter countless lives. Esther occupied a pew near the front, cradling a sleeping Elaine, while Catherine Jose conferred quietly with the police. The elderly Mrs. Sullivan had brought them both warm tea, her aged hands trembling slightly as she poured. The long-serving housekeeper's gaze never left the baby's face, seeing in it echoes of the family she had served for 3 decades. "There's something else you must see," Mrs. Sullivan murmured softly, reaching into her handbag. She withdrew a small worn leather journal. "Leila Jose, she gave this to me the day before the accident. She said if anything ever happened to her, and Mr. Jose, I should ensure it reached the correct individuals at the opportune moment." Esther accepted the journal with trembling hands. As she opened it, a small key dropped into her lap. Catherine moved closer, recognizing her sister's distinctive handwriting on the pages. The journal contained detailed observations about Jackson's conduct over the past year. Leila's escalating concerns about shifts in her son's behavior, notes regarding missing documents and unusual financial transactions she had noticed. But it was the final entry that commanded everyone's attention. October 15th, 2024. Jackson and I have reached our decision tomorrow. We meet with the lawyers to revise our will. Jackson's conduct has become increasingly troubling, and now, with the blessing of a granddaughter on the way, we must ensure the foundation's future is secure. Esther's discovery about the misappropriated funds confirms our gravest fears. Our son requires intervention, not enablement. Sometimes affection demands the most difficult choices. The key is to the safe in Jackson's study, the real safe behind the painting of Boston Harbor. Everything necessary to rectify matters is there. God willing, we will manage this as a family. But if not, this journal and the safe's contents will ensure the truth is illuminated. Most importantly, we want Esther and our precious granddaughter protected. Jackson's actions have demonstrated that the legacy we strove to build is imperiled. Perhaps we failed him as parents, attempting to shield him from life's adversities. But we will not fail our granddaughter. She merits knowing the truth about her heritage. Both the commendable and the regrettable. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth. The painting in Jackson's study, she exclaimed. I always wondered why he never had it properly mounted to the wall. A detective who had been quietly observing nearby spoke gently to Catherine. "Mrs. Jose, if you are willing to accompany us, we should examine that safe as soon as possible, before anyone could move." Jackson's voice rang out from where he sat, handcuffed under police guard. "You don't understand," he uttered, his voice cracking. "I discovered Mother's journal the night before I saw what they were planning. They were going to disinherit me, give everything to the baby. My own parents were going to betray me." The cathedral fell silent. Esther slowly rose, passing Elaine to Mrs. Sullivan. She walked toward Jackson, stopping just beyond his reach. "They weren't betraying you," she said softly. "They were trying to rescue you from yourself, the same way they tried to save thousands of other people's children through the foundation. The foundation was draining us dry." Jackson's composure completely fractured. "Do you comprehend the cost of maintaining our societal standing, the donations, the charity galas, the social obligations? Father never understood. He grew up with old money. He didn't have to contend to retain his place in this world." Catherine stepped forward, her voice sharp as tempered steel. "Is that truly what you believe, that Jackson had an easy path? Your father grew up witnessing his own father squander half the family fortune. He spent his youth laboring to restore not merely our wealth, but our family's honor. He achieved it by assisting others, by constructing something meaningful." She paused, gazing at her nephew with a blend of pity and revulsion. "The foundation wasn't draining us dry, Jackson. It was the wellspring of our authentic wealth. Not in currency, but in purpose. Your parents grasped that. Why couldn't you?" The detective cleared his throat. "We should proceed to that safe," he stated quietly. "Mr. Jose, you will be accompanying us to the station. We have numerous inquiries regarding certain financial transactions. And now concerning the accident." As the police prepared to escort Jackson, Esther suddenly took a step closer to him. The cathedral held its collective breath. She looked at the father of her child, the man who had attempted to silence her, who had played a role in his own parents' deaths and perceived something she had not anticipated. A bewildered individual who had never truly understood the meaning of genuine affluence. Your parents' last thoughts weren't of the foundation or their heritage, or even the truth about what you'd done, she said softly. Their last written words were about their granddaughter, about hope, about love. That's the true Jose Heritage Jackson. And no matter what transpires now, Elaine will know that truth. Jackson's face crumpled for the first time. Since the funeral commenced, real tears streamed from his eyes. He gazed at his daughter sleeping peacefully in Mrs. Sullivan's arms, then at his parents' caskets. I never intended for them to die, he whispered. I just wanted them to miss the meeting to gain more time. I never thought actions have consequences. Jackson, Catherine said, her voice gentler. Now your parents understood that it's time you did too. As the police led Jackson away, Esther returned to her daughter. The evidence in the safe could wait a few more minutes, right now, holding Elaine close. She reflected on Leila Jose's final written words about legacy and truth. The baby stirred, opening those distinctive Jose eyes, and Esther made a silent vow to both her daughter and the grandparents she would never know. The truth of their heritage would endure not merely in documents and court records, but in the very heart of the family. They had striven to safeguard the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, created halos of color around the caskets, and for a moment the cathedral was silent save for the soft sounds of an infant's peaceful breathing. A reminder that even in moments of profound darkness, life and hope persevere. The contents of the concealed safe in Jackson Jose's study proved even more illuminating than anyone had anticipated as Catherine, Esther, and the detectives gathered in the wood-paneled study of the Jose mansion that evening. The full magnitude of both the tragedy and the hope contained within those documents became clear. Jackson had meticulously documented everything, Catherine murmured, spreading the papers across the massive oak desk. Not just his own misdeeds, but also his and Leila's plans for the foundation's future. They had already begun restructuring everything. The safe held not only proof of Jackson's financial crimes, but also elaborate blueprints for the foundation's reformation. Jackson and Leila had been collaborating with a select group of trusted advisors to establish a more transparent and effective charitable organization, one that would be impervious to any individual's manipulation of its resources. Esther sat in one of the plush leather armchairs, Elaine slumbering peacefully in a borrowed bassinet beside her. They knew about the corruption, she stated, perusing another document. They were accumulating evidence, building a case. They wanted to offer Jackson a chance to confess, to rectify matters on his own. Detective Morrison nodded grimly as he examined the financial records. This explains why they were meeting with their lawyers that day. They weren't just planning to protect their granddaughter. They were preparing to completely overhaul the organization. Catherine picked up a sealed envelope bearing her name, her hands trembling slightly as she recognized her sister's handwriting inside was a letter dated merely 2 days before the accident. Dearest Catherine, if you are reading this, something has befallen Jackson and me. Before we could set things right, the responsibility now rests with you, as it always has. When our family faced its darkest hours, the foundation's corruption runs deep. But we've prepared everything necessary to rebuild. More importantly, we've learned. We are about to be blessed with a granddaughter. Her mother, Esther, possesses the kind of integrity and fortitude that we've always striven to instill in our family. She discovered the truth about the foundation's missing funds and chose to champion what is right despite the personal cost. If anything happens to us, you must safeguard them both. Elaine deserves to understand her heritage. Not just the Jose name, but the true legacy of service and accountability that our parents imparted to us. Jackson requires assistance, Catherine. We failed him somewhere along the way, but perhaps through Elaine our family's authentic purpose can be restored. All our love, Leila. Catherine wiped tears from her eyes as she finished reading. Even then, they were considering everyone else. The foundation's beneficiaries, Jackson's potential redemption, Elaine's future. Esther reached out and gently squeezed Catherine's hand. They never abandoned the belief that truth could heal even if it caused initial pain. The next few hours unfolded in a flurry of activity. Board members were contacted, emergency meetings scheduled, and preliminary legal proceedings initiated. The Jose Foundation's corruption would require months to fully unravel, but its reformation had already begun. As evening descended, Catherine discovered Esther standing in Leila's private sitting room, contemplating the family photographs adorning one wall. Elaine was awake, now her eyes quietly absorbing the warm lamplight. Leela always cherished this room, Catherine murmured. She said it reminded her of what truly mattered. Not the galas or the society pages, but the lives we touched, the family we nurtured. Esther traced her finger over a photograph of Jackson and Leela at a hospital opening. I used to clean in here, she said quietly. Leela would often come in while I worked. She'd recount stories about each photograph, about the people they'd assisted. I never told her how much those conversations meant to me. She knew. Catherine smiled gently. My sister was perceptive. That way, it's likely why she and Jackson weren't surprised when they learned about Elaine. They had already recognized the kind of person you were. Detective Morrison appeared in the doorway, his expression serious but compassionate. Miss Dolly, we need you to come to the station tomorrow to provide a formal statement. And Mrs. Jose, he turned to Catherine, the district attorney would like to meet with you about the foundation's records first thing in the morning. Catherine nodded. Of course, the entire truth must emerge, no matter how painful. After the detective departed, Catherine turned back to Esther. You and Elaine will remain here, of course. This is your home now. It's what Leela and Jackson desired. Esther surveyed the elegant room, contemplating all that had transpired. Are you certain? After everything, Catherine stated firmly, especially after everything, this house requires life again, requires laughter and hope. Elaine is a Jose, but more importantly, she is the future Leela and Jackson envisioned. One built on truth and compassion, rather than appearances and power. As if grasping the moment's significance, Elaine reached out toward a shaft of fading sunlight that bathed the room in soft gold. Her tiny hand caught the light, and for a moment, both women watched in silence as the baby explored the interplay of shadows on her fingers. Jackson's arraignment is scheduled for Monday, Catherine stated quietly. The evidence is overwhelming. Not just the financial crimes, but his role in the accident. He will likely face substantial prison time. Esther hugged Elaine closer. I never desired this, any of it. I simply wanted the truth to be known. Truth has a way of demanding to be heard, Catherine replied. Sometimes it extracts a steep price, but concealing it costs even more. She gently touched Elaine's cheek. She will know the complete story someday, both the sorrow and the triumph. It is part of her heritage now. As night fell over the Jose mansion, its rooms felt different, purified, somehow, despite the revealed pain and loss. In Leela's sitting room, surrounded by photographs of a legacy worth preserving, a new chapter was commencing. Elaine Jose would grow up understanding not only the power of truth, but the strength of those who choose to uphold it regardless of the cost. The Jose family's narrative had been irrevocably altered. But perhaps, Esther reflected, as she watched her daughter drift off to sleep, it had been altered for the better. The truth had indeed caused pain, but it had also opened the door to healing, not just for their family, but for all those who had been affected by the Foundation's work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Investigations to complete restitution, to be made, a foundation to rebuild. But tonight, in the quiet of the Jose mansion, two women from profoundly different backgrounds found themselves united in a shared purpose: protecting the legacy of truth that Jackson and Leela Jose had died trying to preserve. 3 months after the funeral that altered everything, St. Michael's Cathedral hosted another Jose family gathering. This time, it was for Elaine's christening. The very space that had witnessed shocking disclosures now welcomed new beginnings, though the echoes of that dramatic day still lingered in everyone's memories. Catherine Jose stood at the front of the church now, Elaine's legal guardian, alongside Esther, watching as guests filled the pews. The preceding months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, foundation restructuring, and the slow process of mending old wounds. But today was about facing forward, not looking back. The press remains outside, the young man whispered to his sister. As he adjusted his tie at 17, he had matured significantly since that rainy day when he had carried his niece into the cathedral. The past months had aged him beyond his years. Esther nodded, cradling Elaine in her christening gown, the very one Leela Jose had worn as an infant. Let them wait. Today isn't about headlines. The media frenzy surrounding the Jose case had been intense. Jackson's trial had dominated Boston's news cycle, exposing decades of financial manipulation and the tragic reality behind Jackson and Leela Jose's deaths. His guilty plea had astonished many, but those who had witnessed his breakdown at the funeral understood. Some burdens become too crushing to bear. Catherine approached them, elegant as ever in a navy blue suit, The foundation's new board members are present, she murmured, including representatives from every hospital and school impacted by Jackson's actions. The Jose Foundation's reformation had been Catherine and Esther's paramount focus, utilizing Jackson and Leela's detailed blueprints. Discovered in the safe, they had rebuilt the organization from its foundations. Every misappropriated dollar was being traced. Restored with interest, more importantly, they had implemented the transparency and oversight that Jackson and Leela had envisioned. Mrs. Sullivan appeared with a warm bottle for Elaine, her weathered hands shaking slightly. As she poured, the longtime housekeeper's role had evolved from employee to something akin to family. Judge Harrison just arrived, she reported. He confirms the foundation's new legal structure is officially sanctioned. The judge had been instrumental in ensuring the foundation's transformation was legally sound. Under the new framework, no single individual could ever again wield the kind of control that had enabled Jackson to manipulate its resources. The board now encompassed representatives from beneficiary organizations, financial experts, and most significantly former recipients of the foundation's aid. As Father Matthews commenced the christening ceremony, Esther couldn't help but recall the last time she had stood in this cathedral. The truth she had fought to reveal had extracted a steep price. A family fractured, a son imprisoned, beloved parents gone too soon. But from those painful disclosures, something novel and more resilient had emerged. Elaine, Leela, Dolly, Jose. Father Matthew intoned clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. The names held profound significance, honoring both her maternal lineage and the grandmother she would never meet, but whose heritage she would carry forward. Catherine had insisted on legally adding the Jose name, not out of vanity, but as a reminder of accountability. She will know all of it, she had stated during the legal proceedings, the good and the bad. That is how we ensure history does not repeat itself. The reception afterward was held at the Jose mansion, now transformed from a symbol of hidden secrets into a place of new beginnings. The grand dining room, which had once hosted countless charity galas, now served as the foundation's weekly meeting space, where authentic decisions about assisting real people were made with complete transparency. Esther found herself once again in Leela's sitting room, Elaine sleeping peacefully in her arms. The wall of photos had been updated. Alongside the historical images of the foundation's work, new ones narrated the story of its reformation. Pictures of reopened hospital wards, revitalized educational programs, and the faces of those who had received assistance created a tapestry of healing and hope. Catherine stated, joining her with 2 cups of tea. Leela kept a journal about you long before any of this occurred. She placed the cups down and produced a small worn notebook. I found it when we were reorganizing her study. Listen to this entry from last year. Watched Esther with the children at the foundation's summer program. Today she possesses something rare. The ability to perceive people, not just problems. It reminds me of what the foundation was always meant to be. Jackson agrees. Sometimes, the most significant legacies arise from unexpected sources. Esther wiped away tears as Catherine continued reading selections from Leela's diary. Each entry revealed how deeply Elaine's grandparents had valued integrity and compassion over social standing and wealth. The young man appeared in the doorway. The last board members are departing, he announced, then hesitated. There's a letter from Jackson. The room fell silent. Jackson's letters had become monthly occurrences, part of his therapy, and an attempt at atonement. He never sought forgiveness, only understanding, and shared insights into how he had strayed. Each letter was carefully preserved to be shared with Elaine when she was old enough to comprehend her father's complex heritage. Place it with the others, Esther said softly, in the blue box. In the study, the blue box had been Leela's, found in the safe alongside the evidence now. It contained the ongoing narrative of a family reconstructing itself from truth rather than pretense. Someday Elaine would read all of it. The newspaper articles, the letters, the diaries, and the court documents. She would understand how her grandparents died, striving to protect what was right, how her mother stood firm for truth, and how her father lost his way, but finally confronted his actions. As evening descended, the last rays of sunlight streamed through the sitting room windows, catching the crystal mobile hanging over Elaine's bassinet. Gift from the children's ward at Boston General Hospital. The light dispersed into rainbow patterns across the walls, dancing over the photographs of past and present. Catherine mused, observing the light play across her grandniece's peaceful face. Leela always said that true legacy isn't in what we leave behind, but in how we inspire others to move forward. Esther looked down at her daughter, seeing in her face echoes of all those who had sacrificed for truth and justice. Then will ensure Elaine knows that her legacy isn't just the Jose name or the foundation's work, it's the courage to uphold what's right even when it hurts. It's the wisdom to learn from both triumph and tragedy. As night settled over the Jose mansion, the specters of its past seemed to recede before the promise of its future in Elaine's nursery, formerly Leela's private study. A new generation would grow up surrounded by stories of truth's power to both dismantle and heal. The Jose legacy had been broken, but in breaking it had been remade into something stronger, a testament to the enduring power of honesty, courage, and love. 1 year after the funeral that irrevocably altered their world, Esther Dolly stood in the expansive garden of the Jose mansion, observing her daughter's wobbly inaugural steps on the meticulously manicured lawn. Elaine's gleeful laughter echoed across the very space where just last week the foundation had hosted its first annual community impact celebration. A profoundly different kind of assembly from the lavish galas of yesteryear, the garden had undergone a complete transformation under Esther and Catherine's guidance. Where once purely decorative blossoms flourished, there now thrived an organic vegetable patch, supplying fresh produce to local food banks. The antiquated greenhouse had been converted into an educational center, where children from foundation-supported schools learned about sustainable living and communal accountability. She possesses Leela's tenacity, Catherine observed joining Esther on the terrace. At 18 months old, Elaine already exhibited glimpses of the Jose spirit, not in privilege or social standing, but in an innate desire to connect with others. Only yesterday, she had insisted on sharing her favored stuffed animal with a child at the Foundation's daycare center. The young man, now preparing for university with a scholarship in social work, looked up from his textbook, and Esther's compassion, he added, watching his niece toddle toward Mrs. Sullivan, who was arranging afternoon tea. The past year had brought numerous shifts to the Jose legacy. The Foundation's reformation had become a definitive case study in corporate transparency and charitable organization. Overhaul. Esther and Catherine's unwavering insistence on complete disclosure, publishing detailed reports of every dollar expended, and its tangible impact had established new benchmarks in the nonprofit sector. Jackson's personal narrative had also embarked on a path toward atonement. Incarcerated, he had begun collaborating with other white-collar offenders, assisting them in comprehending the human toll of financial malfeasance. His monthly letters to Elaine, carefully stored in Leela's blue box, had evolved from mere explanations to profound reflections on values, veracity, and the authentic meaning of heritage. The Boston Globe is preparing a follow-up piece. Catherine mentioned assisting Mrs. Sullivan with the tea tray. They wish to focus on how the Foundation's new methodology has actually boosted donations and community engagement. Esther nodded, recalling how apprehensive some board members had been that the scandal would annihilate donor confidence. Instead, their steadfast commitment to transparency and direct community involvement had attracted a new generation of benefactors who prioritized genuine impact over social prestige. The Jose mansion itself stood as a symbol of this metamorphosis. The formal dining room now hosted weekly community meetings. The ballroom had been repurposed into a multifunctional space for nonprofit organizations to utilize free of charge. Even Leela's cherished sitting room, while retaining its warm personal ambience, now displayed artwork from children in foundation-supported programs. Alongside the family photographs, Elaine's nursery remained a special sanctuary, a bridge between past and future. The walls still featured the Jose family portraits, but among them now hung images of Esther's parents who had lived and died. Believing in the power of diligent work and education to transform lives, Elaine would grow up knowing both facets of her heritage: the privilege of the Joseas and the perseverance of the Dollys. As the afternoon sun cast elongated shadows across the garden, Esther received a text message from Detective Morrison, who had become a trusted family friend. The final appeal in Jackson's case had been rejected, but there was another development. Jackson had resolved to donate his personal inheritance to establish a new foundation initiative focused on ethical business education and corporate responsibility. He's finally understood what his parents tried to teach him, Catherine murmured softly, reading the message over Esther's shoulder. It's not about the money or the name. It's about the influence we exert on others. Mrs. Sullivan presented a special delivery. A cake celebrating the Foundation's latest accomplishment. They had just completed the full restoration of all misappropriated funds, with interest to every affected organization. More significantly, they had implemented permanent structures to ensure such abuse could never reoccur. As they gathered for tea, Elaine surprised everyone by taking her longest sequence of steps, yet traversing the entire terrace without stumbling. She reached the table and pulled herself up onto Catherine's chair, her Jose eyes bright with triumph. "You know, Esther said," lifting Elaine onto her lap last week, at the Community Impact celebration, someone inquired if I regretted bringing Elaine to the funeral that day. If I wished I had discovered an easier method to expose the truth. Catherine paused, teacup halfway to her lips. Even now, mentions of that day carried emotional weight. "I told them no," Esther continued, stroking Elaine's dark hair, "because that day wasn't merely about exposing wrongdoing, it was about honoring Jackson and Leela's true heritage. Their conviction that truth, no matter how painful, is the bedrock of genuine good. Elaine deserved to be present when that truth came to light, even if she was too young to recall it." The young man closed his textbook, looking pensive. "I recall Mom and Dad always saying that integrity isn't just about being honest. It's about making honest things happen even when it's difficult." Speaking of making things happen, Catherine interjected, producing a folder, the blueprints for the new Jackson and Leela Jose Center for Ethics and Community Service are ready for review. The university is enthusiastic about incorporating real-world case studies into their business curriculum. As they discussed the plans, Elaine dismounted and toddled toward the garden's edge, where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. She crouched down, gently touching a daffodil with tiny fingers, then turned to beam at her family with pure joy. The moment encapsulated everything the Jose legacy had evolved into. Not a narrative of wealth or status, but of development, authenticity, and the simple beauty of righteous action. Elaine would grow up knowing both the cost and the value of integrity, surrounded by individuals who had chosen truth over convenience, justice over privilege. Mrs. Sullivan, who had observed the Jose family's journey for over 3 decades, summarized it best as she watched Elaine explore the garden. "Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what we are given, but what we choose to do with what we know." As evening approached, the garden filled with golden light. Esther, Catherine, and the young man sat with Elaine, sharing anecdotes and planning for tomorrow. The Jose mansion stood behind them, no longer a symbol of concealed secrets, but a beacon of transparency and hope within its walls. A new heritage was burgeoning, one founded on the understanding that true worth resides not in possessions, but in how we assist others in flourishing. Elaine fell asleep in Esther's arms as the sun set, her small hand clutching the locket that had belonged to Leela, a tangible link between past and future. Inside, alongside a picture of Jackson and Leela, was their cherished quote, now the Foundation's guiding principle. "In truth lies the seed of healing, and healing lies the heart of legacy." The Jose story had become more than a mere tale of scandal and atonement. It was a testament to the enduring power of truth to transform lives, and a reminder that every conclusion holds within it the promise of a new Genesis. As stars began to appear above the garden, their light seemed to bless this new chapter, one penned not in society pages or financial ledgers, but in the hearts and lives of those touched by a heritage reborn through honesty, courage, and affection. Dear friends, we hope you enjoyed this story as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. Your subscription means the world to us and helps us keep sharing amazing and heartfelt stories with you. Your feedback is incredibly important to us. Did you like the story? Please leave a comment and let us know what you think. It helps us continue creating stories that resonate and inspire. Right now, a playlist of more stories from our channel is appearing on your screen. We invite you to explore and enjoy these other captivating tales. Thank you for being part of our journey. We look forward to sharing more stories with you soon. Until next time, music.